We're live and rolling with a very, very exciting interview today with Phil Hunt, who's joining us all the way from the UK. Phil Hunt is the founder CEO of Headgear Films, company that started out in 2002. We'll hear a lot about Headgear Films' journey, and then also a lot of its focus areas, as well as we sort of enter 2026, what are the key focus areas and expansion plans or essentially partnerships that Headgear Films is looking for. We'll hear all about that from Phil. Phil, welcome to the Vitrina podcast. Your voice is going to the entire Vitrina community. Welcome.
Right. Wonderful. Well, good day. I hope you're all well out there.
Fantastic. Phil, would be to get us started, would be great to actually sort of start with an elevator pitch for Headgear Films. What are the key sort of lines of business? What are the key sort of areas of operation? Maybe we can start there, and then we can sort of talk about some of the plans that the company has.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, Headgear is like coming up for a quarter of a century old. And we started out as a production company. I had produced a couple of micro-budget movies, and I met my co-founder, a guy called Compton Ross, who came on board for the ride as my investor partner. And a quarter of a century later, we have financed around 550 odd movies, and I believe Compton and I are now the most highly credited producers ever in the UK since records began in 1906. So we've been hard at work. So we started as a production company, actually. And after a while, I realized that it's really hard producing. And I had jumped in straight as a producer. In fact, I was a photographer for many years before that and thought, well, this is easy. This has got to be easy. Let's try producing. So I did that, attempted that, and failed miserably. So I said to Compton, let's start cutting deals. Let's put money into people who really know what they're doing, as opposed to me who hadn't got a clue. So that's kind of how we started 25 years ago. And slowly we did a few little bits and pieces. And then I turned my attention to starting another company up called Bankside Films, which is a foreign sales company. And once I'd kind of got that nicely up and running, I turned my attention back to Headgear to really go full throttle on being a lending outfit. So for the first 3 quarters of Headgear's life, we were really just a lending company, just lending money to a bunch of different movies. And then it's only in recent years that we've expanded our footprint as a producer and started packaging projects on behalf of other real producers. So when I say we're producers, we really kind of come on board once. So we don't do any development, we don't do the creative, but because the whole industry has become much, much harder in terms of getting movies off the ground and getting movies sold, you need cohorts of people to be a fully fledged production company, of which most producers just simply don't have. But, we've got just under 30 people employed in this office. So there's a massive amount of resource and experience there. So we've got this production side of the company. So we come on board projects. We've got a roster of producers that we work with across their slate. And we come on board and effectively kind of almost be their business affairs side of producing. We're in the background, keeping the machine moving, getting it packaged, running finance plans, dealing with everything that's legal and financial, and getting movies off the ground that way. And then we have our original lending side. So that's just, that's all about being able to view films really from a deal point of view. So not so much like, hey, what's the script look like? And, do we have passion and faith in the material? It's really about structured lending. Now, quite often we'll put some, some what's called gap in the industry or senior equity. And then we really do get involved, and then that moves somewhere between producing and lending. So yeah, then the material has to completely work, right? So that's a kind of overview of the past, what I've been doing over the past quarter of a century, I guess.
That is a fascinating journey, and you hit upon so many different and interesting terms. All of those are so relevant, actually, Phil, right now at where the industry stands today. You talked about micro budgets, you talked about debt and equity financing, you talked about just this the difficulty of getting projects financed, and that problem has come back to haunt us. There was a phase of excesses, especially just this whole revenge productions that happened right after COVID, where there was a lot of capital available. And some companies really benefited from that big surge of productions that came in. But at this point, the industry is going through a big crunch on production financing, even development financing to an extent. I was actually wanting to double click on a couple of aspects that you talked about, Phil. One was relating to what are the key sort of focus areas from a genre perspective, markets perspective, budgets perspective. Like, what's your sweet spot in terms of the project selection for the projects that you decide to back?
Yeah, so our sweet spot, I guess, and what we're really primarily looking for are projects that, this may sound pretty obvious, but what the market really wants, okay? And we're very much in the center of the carousel, being the marketplace. We do a lot of volume. We're doing about 35, 40 movies a year in Headgear Films, which is a phenomenal amount. I mean,
That
it's
is
more than
phenomenal.
studios do.
Yeah.
So we see a lot of data. We've got great deep relationships with the buyers and the sellers, which make the marketplace. So we listen to them all the time. So whatever it is they want is what we want. What do they want right now? It's harder than ever before. There used to be a time when you could pre-sell a film off an idea before a script was even written. I mean, it definitely, in my early years, I remember there were movies that were being touted around Cannes Film Festival, and they were being financed through pre-sales off an idea. But those days are long gone, and now it's really about, like, your movie has to be completely exceptional. There's no room for anything other than exceptional. So let's break that down. What does that really mean? First, let's talk about genre. So the genres that are working in the marketplace, predominantly, it's not drama. Drama is not really working. And I'm talking about the independent world here. I'm not talking about studios, which is pretty much an entirely different business model in itself, right? Because they're controlling the whole value chain, whereas the independent business is passing off the risk at each stage, right? So it's a very different business model. Even though the product is the same, being a movie, it's a very different business model. So the kinds of movies that the market is looking for is like that. It's action, thriller, horror. Those three kinds of genres specifically are working. I feel that the buyers have become really safe. When there was a time when they took more risk on cross genres, I think today the only cross genre that's working nowadays is the completely exceptional one that does win at the major award festivals, or gets Academy Award nominated. And I'm just trying to think of one to give you an example. I can't think of any right now because there probably is only one in the past few years. But so I think, like, there's a lot of movies that are great that are just being left on the side of the pavement, right? It's just they're not being bought by the market, because for those buyers it's become too challenging. And this is another podcast, like, and why? And I'll give you it in a sentence or two. the digital revolution has screwed it completely.
Yeah.
No windows, nothing. Values have plummeted. So think about this as like when I started in the 90s, before Headgear even, there'd be these windows where you could go to the cinema and then some months later, you'd have to wait to get it on a rental, a
Hmm.
VHS or DVD rental.
Hmm.
And then you have to wait to buy the DVD or VHS to go from like $100 to $15, $20.
Yeah.
And then eventually it was on free TV. Today, it's all collapsed into one, and
Yeah.
there's no physical anymore. And that's where there was a huge amount of revenue, right? So now for a subscription of $10 or maybe 15, 18 a month now, you can watch, I don't know, hundreds, thousands and thousands of hours for the same price as it was to buy one film.
Wow.
So it's being controlled also by a small handful of those streamers, and they are kind of now going a little bit to the lowest common denominator.
Hmm.
There's a lot of shows on there. Film, TV, etc. is blurred, and they're going to put up loads of content, like podcasts. In fact, are going to go up on Netflix, I hear. But it is a bit more lowest common denominator now. So there's these movies that just are being passed by. So then you've got like the exceptional thing, which is there's less room for those big breakout movies that you can financially gain and profit at film level. So again, that's like another massive long podcast to describe how the economics break down between box office from consumer to the distributor, and then from distributor, from the distributor to the film level and the film investment. So there's not that much correlation, weirdly, between the success at box office and how much money comes down to the film. There's some, but weirdly, less and less as time goes on. In other words, like if you don't have an exceptional movie, you will get lost and it becomes non-theatrical. And as soon as your film is non-theatrical, the income that you get back to the film investment level has gone down by 90%. It's
Wow.
crazy.
Jeez.
It's crazy. Yeah.
That is crazy. Yeah.
Challenging times, right? So we're looking for low cost, high concept within those genres, with A-list and successful directors. So the bullseye is tiny. That's what we're looking for.
That is fascinating. So there's so many questions, Phil. So this is you paint a really, really exciting picture, just especially with the change that you've mapped from the VHS days and the windowing days to this whole flattening of the windows, right? One question that I had was, just when you look at the 40 movies that you will support in a year, what is the breakdown of that? How do you sort of break up your portfolio in a year? How just open-ended question. How do you how do you break up the 40 movies?
Yeah. So my answer now is very different to what it was 5 years ago, and certainly
that was going to be my next question, which is like, how's that changed? But okay, you preempted that.
Well, so it's definitely changed because of the market, but more so it's changed because I've been learning and really almost what Headgear Films has become is almost like a hedge fund, because we're now so process driven, and this all sounds very dull, I guess, from a creative perspective. But we're so process driven, and have a lot of, complex underwriting tools.
Right.
Think about the data that I've got. Yeah, relationships for sure, but as well as the data. So we look at portfolio management like as a big thing here. So what does that mean? It means being conscious of concentration risks. Okay, so
Yep.
not putting everything in on black, right? You want to spread it around a little bit.
That's right.
So we're reviewing all those concentration risks and the different risk buckets, right? So you've got this kind of movie is high risk, this is low risk. So, you've got to be careful about how much money you put into each of these different kinds of movies, different kinds of assets, different kinds of collateral, all that stuff, as well as what does the market want, right? What does the market want? But, we're living in days where even you got a lot of change in the business, a lot of companies going out of business or merging. So, and because the timeline of making a film going from pre-production to exploitation can be, a year plus, things change really quickly today, more than ever before. Again, because of the digital revolution. I mean, you got to remember, like, I was working pre-digital revolution. I can tell you, it was a very, very different world. It was, slower. There was less, booms and busts. The cycles have become much quicker, but that's the point. Is that in the financial markets, the cycles are super quick. But film, you can't speed film up. It's difficult to speed the production of film up, right? So that kind of goes some way to answering your question, I think.
Got it. And no, I think that, and again, it begs a few more sort of deeper dives, just in terms of, like, for instance, those 40 projects, is it largely a mix of debt, some equity? Is it, what would be a sort of size of project? Is it always
Yeah.
in the same size, or is it kind of like distributed on a, you talked about it being a hedge fund, almost like a hedge fund.
Yeah.
I'm very curious on how the portfolio is sliced, from your perspective.
Yeah. So we do movies with budgets of, I think, probably the smallest has got to be a couple of million. I mean, the biggest we've done is 80, but that was a real outlier. I'd say that the average budget movie that we do is probably around the mean size. In fact, I'd say on average, the mean is probably about 8, 9, something like
Okay.
that. So we've got a couple this year. We've done a couple of slightly larger ones. One just shy of 30, one just shy of 20, and then most of them, as I say, kind of falling in that just sub $10 million range. When I started, I was doing a lot lower budgets, but now we've got more and more money to deploy. So yeah, we're looking, we're doing it, the larger budget movies. And funnily enough, they always say that the larger movies are less risky, and there's definitely something in that for sure. Again,
Right.
depending on how you structure it all. But so we do a mix of debt and equity. But there was a panel almost 2 years ago that I did, saying, is gap the new equity? Gap meaning senior equity. It's like, yeah, it is, right? It completely is. Again, when I started, banks were doing gap. Even
That's
banks
right.
were doing gap. And then around the turn of the century, they started to stop doing gap. But that kind of tells you quite a lot. And then a lot of my competitors, they're not doing gap. And there's a reason for it, is because it's really tough to sell a film, even when it's completed. Again, it's got to be exceptional. So when, there was a time when 100%, 90% of movies could sell okay on a completed film. Now I'd say like 10% can sell as a completed film. So that's tough, man.
That is crazy. Wow. I was actually talking to a film fund in India maybe a month ago, and they were actually sort of talking about micro budgets as another big sort of opportunity. their sort of observation was that they were able to make a much larger return on smaller budget movies, especially if you just de-risk the movie from a budget perspective, right? It could actually produce, maybe a much bigger outcome. I don't know if you had any thoughts about that. Is this now an era for some time of micro budgets going back to just lower budget content?
Yeah, I think, look, I think you can do well by making micro budgets if you're controlling a lot of that value chain and you're managing to make it in a territory that is supportive of its own homegrown movies, right? So, like India, it is. France,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
most other, England, the UK is not. Like
that's right.
you, there's almost no movies that you can do just for the UK and
Right.
recoup your money. So,
Mm,
so I think that you've got to really look at it from an indigenous point of view and make films solely for your own, your own territory. And
mm,
ideally, like I say, like if you're being able to control distribution as well, and you're taking a bit more of the pie, a bit like what studios do, then yeah,
right.
of course you could, to control the costs and make micro budget can work. The
Mm,
problem generally though is you can't buy the star power. And now we're living in
mm,
such a boring celebrity conscious world, which is so sickening, but it is what it is, right? That
right.
people, they they look at you got you got one movie with a star and then you got 10 without a star. Everyone picks the movie with a star even if it's not as good. So then it is about price as well, and right now you've got increasing production costs globally but
Yes.
decreasing revenue. So yeah, I mean, I'm telling every producer to cut their budget in half.
Right.
Um, and they're like, you can't do it, you can't do it. And of course, there are ways, right? And you have to do it because otherwise you
Yes.
won't get the movie off the ground.
That's
So,
right.
but true micro budget movies, I think is really hard,
Right.
certainly in English language.
No, I take your point on that. Again, we have a very large clientele in Hollywood, and man, that again is another story altogether. Just in terms of bloated budgets, or just the inability to sort of, reduce a lot of those costs
Mm.
in that market as well. Um, I was actually, you began to also talk about, Phil, the 5 years and how that things have changed in the 5 years. I was curious about how the monetization and exploitation of that IP also has changed in the 5 years.
Mm.
Can you give us broad sort of percentages, saying that earlier theatrical used to be X, and pay windows would be Y, and now where does that stand? I don't know. It's humongous generalization, but again, for the benefit of a lot of listeners, that'd be really exciting to understand how the business has changed.
Yeah. You should have Stephen Follows on your program. If you don't know who Steve,
Yes,
do you know him?
yes, I know him. I know him. Yes,
Right.
I. The moment you mentioned his name, yes, I will make a note of that. Yes,
Okay. He will answer that question really well. Give him
got it.
questions beforehand. He's a
Yes,
statistician, right? So,
yes,
um,
yes.
uh, so he'll be able to answer that question. But let me give it a go.
Thank you.
So, um, so, sorry, repeat the question. The question was in the past 5 years.
How's the monetization changed? Theatrical has also been under pressure.
Yeah. So in the last 5 years since COVID changed the world, there has been some change. COVID happened, theatrical shut down, and it's never recovered. What's really happened, with COVID was simply that it sped up where we were going to go anyway. So, it would have
Mm,
happened after a few years. So that's all it's done, really. So
right.
theatrical, I mean, you hear some stats that it's theatrical has never been better, but you can make statistics whatever you want them to show, right? I think that for the independent world, at least, it's been a massive struggle. I think theatrical has been incredibly difficult. Why is that? Well, COVID, people go out less, they've got less money. I mean, the economic meltdown that's been occurring in the world nonstop since 2008, or since Brexit, certainly since COVID, right?
Yep.
That's been really challenging. So people have less disposable income. They'll stay in, but they've also got bigger TVs. So why go out when you can watch? You got good sound bars, good sound systems. You can watch TV at home, and the cost of going out to the cinema just increases more and more and more because there's a ticket. It's popcorn and all that, and the travel, etc. So theatrical has taken a real hit, but also business and the business to business rather than business to consumer, it's changed considerably, right? Because the streamers came in, flooded the market in terms of buying films a decade ago, but then they stopped buying films, and that became a problem because then where do you sell your films to? So we started kind of that started drying up, and they started making their own original movies, which was great if you're a producer that manages to get that gig because the budgets are big, your pay's big. It's a fantastic, it's really fantastic, to be able to get commissioned by one of the streamers. However, if you don't, like most independent movies, then you've got to be reliant on them picking it up. And if they don't pick it up, then we've got the problem that we find ourselves in today. Yeah. So the all rights buyers, or distributors as well as we call them, normally will buy a film for an advance, a minimum guarantee advance, and then what they do is they piecemeal it into the so-called windows, and they'll hopefully do a theatrical and then lay it off to a pay one to one of the streamers. Pay one means in old money, it means like the TV sale, but it's like the SVOD, the streamer subscription video on demand sale. And that's really where most of the income is coming from. So the all rights buyer will sell to a pay one to a streamer, and that's where most of that's really where their advance comes from. So they look at a movie and they go, oh, I love this. They call up a couple of streams. Hey, check this film, but will you buy it from me? If I buy it, great. Whatever that number is that they'll get from the pay one, they'll then offer that as an advance to the film. And then the theatrical's a loss leader, but really then where they were making the money is physical and then transactional and AVOD. So when you buy a film online or when you're watching it from the ads, and there's revenue that comes from the ads. So that's kind of, with the lack of streamers and then the streamers stopped buying them from the all rights buyers. A lot of these all rights buyers, distributors had deals that would run for a few years, that they had put deals. In other words, the streamer would take all their movies as long as they released them on a small screen commitment. So it's easy. It's easy for all rights buyers. Then all that stopped. The streamers stopped buying, and then the all rights buyers didn't have any money to buy independent films. And that's really where we're at now, where their money is, because these are all independent companies, most distributors. Yes, there are studios that buy independent movies, but outside of that, most distributors or all rights buyers are small-ish, and they, they now look to the revenue. Their revenue is not pay one anymore; it's transactional, and it dribbles in a few dollars here, a few dollars there. So that means the value of movies has plummeted massively, because the pay one and pay two must have amounted to like 75% of what the film's value is. So yeah, I'd say that's the big change in the past 5 years. Massive.
Gosh. Fascinating. A couple of other questions just relating to Headgear Films. we're about to say goodbye to 2025. How does 2026 look like? Um, I'm I'm pretty certain that the number of projects that you are getting inbound in, sort of for financing have gone up, given the fact that there is just so little financing available. I'm sure you're sort of having to see lot many projects than you were maybe a few years ago. Talk a little bit about, just 2026 and how does that look like for Headgear?
Yeah. How does 2026 look like for Headgear? Good question. We are getting huge amounts of submissions because people are just not getting their films made. The problem is their finance plans are just pie in the sky. They're not going to work. So, our ask, we're being asked for huge amounts of effectively equity. And we're looking at it going like, you can't do this. You just can't do this. Your budget needs to come down massively, or just don't do
Right.
that movie. Some movies, period movies, action movies, if you've got a Jason Statham movie without Jason Statham and it's like a nobody, you're screwed. You
Yeah.
can't make it. But there's a lot of people that think, oh no, I'll get it made. Oh, I believe in my movie so much. But the fact is that you just can't. So there's a huge amount of movies right now that, are being submitted. It will never, ever get off the ground.
Right.
So it's becoming, you're doing the work, you're doing twice the amount of work for the same amount of money these days. I'm not sure how 2026 will look. I think it's so hard to predict. A lot of people are saying, oh, the market will come back. It's never coming back. It's going to change because it always changes nonstop, but it's never coming back. I don't know what that change is going to be like, but you have to make sure that you keep your overheads as low as possible, that you're always retaining as much of your capital as you can and not making big risks. The film industry is full of risk takers, me included, but one has to be very careful and mindful in order to survive another year. But hey, I'm looking forward to 2026 and the challenges that it will come.
Got it. No, that's great advice. Again, for there are lots of independent producers who do our podcasts. This will be great advice for them. My last question was really relating to international. And if there are projects that have an international appeal, is there a lens that you put on saying that, oh, like this could work in the English world, or this could work in the US? How do you sort of look at international as a component beyond, let's say, the UK or European market?
Yeah, so look, everything we do here is for the international market. There's very, very few movies that can be made solely for the UK market or Australian market, more so for North American, because it's just a bigger number of people, right? We are based in London, UK, and we're a British company, but I never ever think of our business, of Headgear's business as British. We're completely international. Everything that we do is focused on international. I've never really done anything that I'm thinking, oh, hey, this is a British movie, I don't need international. I'm constantly, building projects up to ensure that they have maximum potential for the international market. Look, we only do English language. We might have done one or two, non-English language. But it's just the way the international marketplace works, right? Like English language, it may get dubbed or subtitled, but it does export to pretty much every territory around the world. So yeah, international all the way.
Got it. No, this is fantastic. Phil, just we covered a lot of ground. There is a part 2 of this podcast that we have to do, because there are lots of other questions, especially some of these market changes relating to financing. New formats that are coming in very quickly: vertical videos, micro series, there are a few other nuances that I'd love to get your view on. But our focus today was to introduce Headgear Films to our entire community, and to get you essentially talking about market forces and financing in general. Thank you so
Great.
much for talking to the Virginia community today, Phil.
A pleasure. And we can continue at another time, but thanks very much at all. Thanks for choosing me, and get in touch with Stephen Fellows.
I will. He's on my list already now, so I will actually. Thank you so much.
All right.
All right.
Take care.